Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you from Film Fanatic headquarters. It's about 9:39, and it's a Sunday. It's pretty gray and overcasty day here in Mid Coast, but a little chilly. But hopefully the sun might come out. I think the sun might come out later. But hope everyone's doing good. Uh, Want to say give a shout out to some new folks recently who have subscribed to this madness, which is my channel, Film Fanatic. Really appreciate the love. And again, there's been a rash of some new folks commenting on the videos, and that's really great. I love to. Well, it's funny. I love the comments and all of those things, but I'm not like. I like to. I'm more of a person who goes, takes a deeper dive into. I like conversations more in person a lot of the times. Like, I'm not really. Sometimes I've gotten that from friends of where I have like responded like through text or various ways that we use social media. Where we're communicating things. A lot of the times, a couple, sometimes friends will say, "Well, you like, you don't talk very much, or you don't really lay out what you're talking about so much. They're kind of short and brief messages." And I typically am that way. I don't know. I have this funny thing with communicating with people, as far as when it comes to things that are super in depth that way online. I'm more of like in person. Like if I have a conversation about, I can have those conversations about those things sometimes with people, to a point of where it could be kind of annoying. So I always feel more comfortable that way. But I really appreciate people commenting on a lot of the videos that's been happening again. And I've been, most of the shows are about movies that, they're pretty untalked about. They're pretty underground, pretty unknown. And thanks to all of the wonderful, boutique labels that have been, that have emerged in the last few years. They're putting out all these just incredible releases, and it's truly a renaissance period. I think it's as far as being a collector and a movie lover, it's a real special time. I mean, it's unprecedented, and it's like, and from that perspective, it's I think it's the best time to be alive. It's crazy. So it's kind of unparalleled on how you can find, whether it's something you saw years ago or in passing, and maybe when you were a kid. Like for me, that's usually the case. And or a movie, some of the most obscure movies you've never even seen or heard about. Suddenly, they're put in the forefront, and they're getting these incredible releases. It's wild, and that's the thing that just blows me away continually. Is that so? Like when people comment on some of these shows that I put up, it's great and it means a lot. And these a lot of these films are not ever talked about, so they're pretty obscure. I do cover lots of movies that are new and movies that I've gone to see in the theater, and contemporary horror films. I think this year has been actually a really good year for horror films. I know I've said it in the past and in a lot of other videos that I've been really kind of bummed out by, that I don't go to the movies as much. And I've been kind of, bummed out by the amount of movies. I've been, pretty disappointed. There's so many movies that come out during the summer, and now that we're going into the fall, films are still coming out, but it's at a slower pace, and they tend to be more, melodramas, films like that come out towards the summer. I mean, towards the fall, or in the fall season. And but looking back, kind of snuck up on me, where I realized, wow, like there's, when it comes to horror, which is my favorite genre, there's been some incredible films that have come out this year. So I think I'm going to do a show, which I've never done before. I've never done a show of where, my favorite films of that year. And so I think I'm going to be doing that pretty soon. And so stay tuned for that because it's been a really good year for horror films. And so, just 2024 alone, I've been really surprised by the amount of movies, the diversity of films, and and I'll talk about movies that I did get a chance to see it in the theater, and movies that I just recently rented. So it's been a as a whole for movies, it's been pretty lame. But when it comes to I think horror films, newer modern 2024 horror films, it's been uh, kind of. Kind of amazing. And when I think about the films I've seen, the each film that comes to mind that really stands out, they are they're really diverse. They're really different from each other, and to me, that's the coolest thing. Because you always want being a genre lover, you always want like there's that template, there's that thing that makes a film work really well, and there is that for instance, like slasher films, there's that template of the tropes that you see and often make those films work. But it's always nice, I think, for art in general and for the genres to kind of keep, where they're still they still have an importance and that they have a long lasting power. There always has to be, a few directors or creative minds that have to kind of like push the envelope a little bit or do something unique and work outside of those perimeters, but yet push the genre forward to be able to make it current, to stay current and still keep that genre alive. So I think there's been a few movies this year are that are definitely good examples of that. So I'm gonna do a show on that where I'm gonna be talking about those films and this past year or this year. So I'm kind of excited about that. So that being said, Halloween's approaching, and a lot of people are doing their when it comes to YouTube, a lot of people are doing their top 10 or top 20 horror tier lists, those kinds of things. Um, and it's funny because I I've seen other YouTube guys talk about this. For me, I watch scary movies all year round. I watch horror movies all the time and constantly, pretty much every day, and or every night. So, I mix it up and I watch other things, but that's pretty much my jam. So Halloween, again, it's my favorite holiday, but I don't do anything different. I guess is what. Yeah, I don't do anything different when it comes to my habits necessarily. I like to do something fun and cool on Halloween, which I hopefully will get a chance to do. The one thing I do as far as the one thing I do that is definitely different, and it's totally driven by the season, obviously. I always watch every year. I always watch Halloween, John Carpenter's classic slasher film, and that's such a classic film, and I always watch that every Halloween. That's the only thing I do differently. I don't tend to watch that movie outside of that, but I do. I do. I finally bought Halloween, the Blu-ray version that I've been wanting for years and years, and I finally got a really, really good copy of it. And I bought that last year, and I've done a show on that. But I usually watch that movie and also the Halloween films on in the Halloween season. Other than that, it's kind of business as usual. So today's show, and it's going to be probably a series of shows, just because I've done multiple shows on this franchise, And I've talked about it probably to the point, of nauseum. But again, I'm a film fanatic, and so I can't get enough of these films. And so I just recently I've been watching them all over again, and I've been just, I just always it never gets tired. I never get tired of it. It's always an exciting experience. So about probably about 4 years ago, I bought this really awesome Friday 13th collection, and it's it's a it's a huge box set. It's got all of the movies, all of the Friday 13th movies, Blu-ray. It's a Blu-ray set. All the movies are remastered, and all of there's all kinds of special features on the discs. The transfers are amazing. And again, I've done many shows on these movies, but I'm watching them all over again. So I thought, well, I love these movies to death, and Friday 13th is my favorite franchise. I've done at least two or three shows on these movies, and I was like, well, what the hell? I'll do more shows on them. So, sometimes with movies, like anything, music or a book you revisit, that you reread, or even a place that you go to, an actual physical place, maybe a beach area, or a great restaurant, or whatever it is. You always have that experience with like nostalgia around it. You're tied to it, and sometimes that experience, when you go back to it after your initial experience, is like not as good, or it's like, oh, it's kind of faded a little bit. Or you have that experience, which happens to me a lot, where you go back to those places, and it is tied to very much a nostalgic thing. It's just as powerful. And for me, Friday 13th's like that. The Friday 13th franchise. It's always been, my favorite franchise of all time, my favorite horror franchise of all time. I've always felt it's the most consistent. They're all like, let's face it, they're all kind of crappy movies, but they're super fun. I think with what they were able to do with the story and the storyline and the world building, they do some really creative things, and I think they always kept a pretty cool consistency, really solid. They're always very entertaining. They're tied together really really well, and I think there's enough creativity. There was a lot of enough creativity in the films to keep them kind of new and fresh, and to you know keep them interesting. And I think all of the films, really, I can't really think of any of the Friday 13th movies that are, I feel, not consistent. And I think you can, and I also think, you can actually watch any of these movies as they are. Like, I think they're, to a degree, I think they're kind of standalone movies. You know, a lot of times with franchises, and that's kind of the point of a franchise, you can't really watch a movie necessarily, or understand certain things when it's kind of out of context. So you kind of have to watch watch the films in order. But I think Friday 13th, solid. I think it's really well done. The franchise as a whole. I think what Victor Miller created, and especially Sean Cunningham created. They were the writers and director of the first Friday 13th, which came out in 1980. And at first they created this movie for Paramount that was going to be initially just a ripoff of John Carpenter's Halloween, which came out in '78, and Friday 13th came out in 1980. And this movie, basically, they don't, whenever you see interviews with Sean Cunningham or Victor Miller, they never pull any punches and just say what their inspiration was for creating Friday 13th. And it was really based on, well, slasher movies that had come out before them, but their biggest their biggest thing for them was John Carpenter's Halloween, which again came out in '78. That was the main source of inspiration. Victor, Miller talks about, even in the special features on this disc or this collection, there's a lot of great special features, obviously, but they even talk about Victor Miller and Sean Cunningham basically said that Sean Cunningham had been working in the world of kind of horror exploitation for a while. He's made some really, actually, really other great movies. There's one movie of his, I think it's the first movie he directed. I think it's called the Outsiders, and it's a super low budget, kind of horror exploitation movie that's really, really good. It's a weird. It's a very strange movie, but it's great. It's kind of crazy, but they were wanting to kind of like move more and get higher up the food chain and get more successful. So they wanted to make this like the scariest movie that they could make. They wanted to make this like this you know uh, slasher movie that just kicked everyone's ass. And Halloween had come out, and Sean Cunningham had heard about the film. He had not seen it, but when Halloween came out, it was a huge. Initially it wasn't, but then it went on to become a very financially huge film, and a first time for anything that was really an independent horror film to go on to become so successful. Sean Cunningham had heard about this movie quite a bit and saw that this movie was building this huge audience. And Victor Wooten was his partner, his other creative partner. And I remember in this special features, he talks about, hearing about this movie by John Carpenter, Halloween, and it was like this, incredible slasher movie, and it really made an impact. It went on to make lots of money, and it was like this, kind of this game changing movie. It was a game changer. So Victor Miller went to go to the theater to see Halloween, and he said he really loved it. But what he did was he literally took notes, and he copied. Uh, he took notes and really focused on kind of the formulaic nature or the template of that movie, on how it worked. With the jump scares, the teenagers, getting killed off, and the whole scenario of what a slasher film is. And he basically, had after he saw that, he was like, okay, we're gonna make a slasher movie, and they don't pull any punches. That they, directly were not only influenced by Halloween, but they, were their intention was to just like rip it off, and that's what they did. Even though I think when you watch Friday 13th, obviously the setting is different. There's a lot of things about it that I think make it very different and unique. For me, I feel like it's it's a totally different thing, even though obviously it's kind of copied and pasted as far as the template of like how to make a good slasher film. It's a little bit more gory. It's, the Halloween is definitely, obviously it's the most important and iconic slasher movies of all time. But how Friday 13th is a little bit more trashier. It has, of course, one of, the biggest components of Friday 13th is the legendary Tom Savini with his practical horror effects. This Friday 13th definitely took the gore factor in slasher films to another level. And so Halloween more or less has, I mean, incredible atmosphere, and it's very creepy, it's very scary, and it's all about the atmosphere. And there are amazing kills in that movie, but it's more about the atmosphere and creating that vibe of the shape and the season of Halloween. Whereas I felt like with Friday the 13th, it's like kind of a one and done, you know, balls to the wall slasher movie where it's more graphic. There's a little bit more of a sexual thing going on with, especially when it comes to the teenagers at the Camp Crystal Lake. And so it's a little bit more trashy. It's a little bit more ridiculous, and you know, and it has things about it that are unique. So I feel like it's a different experience. But again, like I said, I've been rewatching these movies again, and I've seen these movies so many times I can't even count. I always feel that these movies still really, have an impact, and I think Friday the 13th, the original, still has, um, as far as when it comes to filmmaking and kind of the suspense level, I feel like this movie really has a lot of suspense. It really has. I feel like it has a big influence from Hitchcock, Alfred Hitchcock. It's very suspense driven, great atmosphere, um, and I think as a movie, like from a technical standpoint, I think this movie is. It came out in 1980. I feel like it's never, you know, given the credit. I think it's a little bit above just a trashy slasher movie. I think from a technical standpoint, it's really, really well done. It's really well shot. The cinematography is awesome. Of course, the music, iconic music by Henry Mancini. The score is incredible. The direction is incredible. It's the birth of Kevin Bacon's career. The cast is fun and exciting, and it's got amazing kills. Amazing kills. But there is a lot of suspense in this movie, and I always forget that when I watch this movie, the original. I remember, again, I as a kid I was watching this franchise all the time, always renting these on VHS, seeing them on cable late night. And this movie always scared me a lot as a kid because you didn't know, as opposed to the other Friday the 13th films of where you kind of know who the killer is. It's Jason Voorhees who's back for revenge. So you kind of know who the killer is. So there isn't that element of mystery around that. But there's something unique with the first one. I always feel, uh, and I always think about every time I watch it. Whereas you still don't know who the killer is until the very, very end. And I remember that part because you don't know who the killer is, makes it more suspenseful and a little bit more frightening. And I think arguably, like I said, my favorite franchise of all time. But I think from a technical standpoint, this movie is probably the best in the franchise. I think as far as the craftsmanship, like they came out of Sean Cunningham and Victor Miller came out of the exploitation world. They're indie filmmakers, um, and but they really talented. And so this movie really is at I think a slightly higher level because of that. In the area of suspense and just the from a technical standpoint, it's probably the best movie in some ways. My favorite film of all time is Chapter Three. I mean, sorry, the final chapter, which was the fourth movie. That's my favorite film in the franchise, and I'll be eventually talking about that. But I think this movie is kind of a standalone movie in regards to how well it was actually executed and put together. So stay tuned for um, Friday 13th Part Two, which will be coming up at some point. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time. Peace.